Right. So you probably saw the buzz lately.
Mm-hmm.
This company, Colossal Biosciences, yeah, they're claiming they've actually, well, revived the dire wolf.
The dire wolf, wow. That definitely got people talking.
Yeah, you know, the one that vanished like 10,000 years ago, it was all over the place online, maybe popped up in your feed.
Oh, for sure. And,
Yeah,
those headlines, they really just scratch the surface. There's a much bigger, fascinating story underneath.
absolutely. So that's what we're doing in this deep dive. We're not just repeating the news.
Right.
We want to really unpack what Colossal is saying, look at the pretty amazing science behind it, and also their bigger picture, which is seriously ambitious.
It really is.
And hopefully, give folks a solid understanding without getting bogged down in all the jargon. That's the plan.
Sounds good. We've got the online reports, Colossal's own statements.
Yeah, and there are definitely different takes on this, so we'll try and bring some clarity.
Okay.
Okay, so let's jump in. This dire wolf revival. What exactly did Colossal announce they actually did?
Well, the announcement itself was pretty bold. They said they used DNA they recovered.
Right, from old fossils.
Exactly.
Yeah.
An 11,000-year-old dire wolf tooth. And get this, a 72,000-year-old skull.
Wow, that's ancient.
It really is. And using that DNA plus gene editing tech, they said they produced 3 dire wolf pups.
3 pups. And then there was that detail that really caught fire, wasn't there? About one of them howling.
Oh, yeah, that was powerful. Just 2 weeks old, apparently, and it let out a howl.
They called it Earth's missing howl. I mean, that really paints a picture, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Hit you right here. But that's also where some of the pushback started.
Okay, the controversy. What's the main issue people have?
Well, the critics are saying, look, are these really dire wolves? Because Colossal only edited about 14 genes
Only 14. Out of how many total?
out of roughly 19,000 genes in the wolf genome. So a tiny fraction, relatively speaking.
Right, and that's where that analogy came from, yeah. The one about the sweet potato.
Exactly. The sweet potato and the orange. Like you add a tiny bit of orange DNA to a sweet potato, does that make it an orange?
The implication being a few tweaks don't change what it fundamentally is.
Correct. But, and this is important, that analogy might be a bit misleading here.
How so? Because Colossal is pushing back on that.
They are. Their point is, first off, they didn't just use fragments. They claim they reconstructed the complete dire wolf genome first.
Okay, the whole thing, from the ancient DNA.
Right. Then they compared that full dire wolf genome to the gray wolf genome. Very carefully.
What did they find?
This is the key bit. They identified only about 20 significant differences across just 14 specific genes.
Wait, only 20 differences in just 14 genes? That sounds surprisingly small, given how different they looked.
It does, doesn't it? But according to Colossal, those 20 little variations are the genetic switches for what made a dire wolf a dire wolf.
Like what specifically?
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
They're larger size, obviously. Some had white fur. They had that whiter head, bigger teeth.
Right, more powerful build.
It's exactly. Stronger shoulders, more developed legs, and even apparently those unique howls and growls. They think it's all packed into those 20 differences.
Huh. So even though like 99 point something percent of the DNA is the same as a gray wolf?
About 99.5% similar, yeah.
Yeah, those few targeted changes are responsible for all the defining dire wolf traits. That changes the perspective quite a bit.
It really does. And that's how they countered the sweet potato thing. They said, look,
Okay.
imagine you could engineer a sweet potato.
Okay.
Change just the key genes for, say, appearance, color, taste, so it ends up 99.5% genetically like an orange and looks and tastes like one.
And then calling it an orange wouldn't seem so crazy.
That's their argument. It's about targeting the functionally important differences.
Okay, that makes more sense. It's not random edits. It's specific targeted changes based on the whole genome comparison.
Precisely.
And people are using other terms too, right? Like functional revival.
Yeah, or transgenic gray wolves. Functional revival emphasizes that they act and look like dire wolves.
And transgenic is more about the scientific process, starting with a gray wolf adding genes from another species.
Exactly. It highlights the origin.
Yeah,
They call it. Well, it's kind of semantics, isn't it? The biology is what's fascinating.
definitely. So the video we saw was when they were really young. How are the pups doing now? Are they actually growing into, dire wolf size?
Yeah, that footage was from last year. The 2 older ones, the males, they named them Romulus and Remus.
Ah, nice reference.
Right. They're about 6 months old now
Mm-hmm.
and already 1.2 meters long, weighing around 36 kilos.
Wow, that's pretty big for 6 months.
It is. And they're expected to reach the full adult size, about 1.8 meters long, maybe up to 68 kilos,
Mm-hmm.
standard dire wolf dimensions.
Okay, and there's a third one. A female.
That's right, Khaleesi. She was born about 4 months later.
Khaleesi. Okay, definitely Game of Thrones not there.
Absolutely. And apparently she has white fur, just like the ice wolves in the show. They said that was intentional.
That's kind of cool, linking it to the popular image. So, okay, bringing back the direwolf, even in this sort of functional way, is huge, but this isn't the end game for Colossal, is it?
Not even close.
Yeah.
The dire wolf is, in a way, just one step. It's part of a much, much bigger plan,
Which is?
resurrecting a whole suite of extinct species. And it's not just about, the wow factor. It's tied to a vision of ecological restoration.
Fighting biodiversity loss.
Exactly. Actively trying to combat the crisis we're in.
So, remind us, who is Colossal Biosciences? Where are they based?
They're headquartered in Dallas, Texas, founded by George Church, a pretty big name.
Geneticist, right. Harvard Medical School.
Yep, geneticist, molecular engineer, chemist, professor at Harvard Med. Brings a lot of scientific weight to it.
And the list of animals they're targeting. It's pretty wild.
It really is. You've got the woolly mammoth, of course,
Mm-hmm.
the American mastodon, ground sloth,
Saber-toothed tiger, seriously?
saber-toothed tiger, Tasmanian tiger, the thylacine, the northern white rhino, which is critically endangered,
The direwolf, obviously.
the dire wolf, and even the dodo bird.
That is quite the lineup. Reshaping ecosystems, fighting extinction. What's their slogan?
Make extinction the past. Pretty direct.
Yeah, no kidding. And this vision has attracted serious money, I take it.
Oh, absolutely. Their growth has been phenomenal. They started with $15 million in seed funding in 2021.
Okay.
Today, their valuation is reportedly around $10.2 billion.
Million with a B. Wow.
Yep. They're calling it a hectacorn. Like
Yeah.
10 unicorns put together.
A hectacorn. Okay, that's a new one. It shows the scale of belief in this, though.
Kind of.
Right. Let's dig into the how. CRISPR, we've mentioned it. Can you break that down a bit more for us? How did Colossal actually use it for the dire wolves?
Sure. So CRISPR gene editing was absolutely central. And understanding kind of goes back to this ancient war.
A war.
Yeah, between bacteria and the viruses that infect them. Bacteriophages or phages.
Okay, viruses attacking bacteria.
Right. Phages inject their DNA into bacteria, try to turn them into virus factories, usually kills the bacteria.
But sometimes they survive.
Sometimes. And the ones that do. Scientists found they often had these extra bits of DNA stored away.
DNA from the virus.
Exactly. Little snippets of the attacking phage's DNA. It's like a genetic memory bank, an immune system record of past attacks.
So the bacteria are keeping mugshots of their enemies.
That's a great way to put it. These mugshots, the phage DNA snippets, get stored in a special place in the bacterial DNA called the CRISPR array.
Okay.
And the array has a pattern. You've got the unique phage DNA bits, called spacers, separated by identical repeat sequences, easy cut points.
So they collect the info. How do they use it to fight back?
That involves a protein called Cas9. Think of it as a molecular scalpel or scissors.
Cas9, the scissors. Got it.
So the bacteria makes Cas9 and also makes RNA copies of those stored phage spacers.
Okay.
This RNA acts like a guide.
A guide for the scissors.
Precisely. If the same phage attacks again, the guide RNA recognizes the phage's DNA sequence and leads the Cas9 scissors right to it.
And Cas9 cuts the invading virus DNA.
Snip disables the virus. It's like a targeted genetic defense system. Really elegant.
Incredible. So how did scientists jump from bacteria fighting viruses to editing, say, wolf DNA?
The huge leap was realizing this system is programmable. You can design your own guide RNA.
To match any DNA sequence you want in any organism.
Pretty much. You create a guide RNA for the specific gene you want to target, put it into a cell along with the Cas9 enzyme.
And the guide RNA takes Cas9 right to that spot in the genome.
Exactly. Cas9 makes the cut precisely where you told it to. And that opens the door to all sorts of edits, deleting genes, inserting new ones, making tiny changes.
Wow. Okay, so back to the direwolf. Colossal had the full direwolf genome. They knew the 20 differences in those 14 genes. How did they apply CRISPR?
Right. So first step, they took a gray wolf cell and extracted its nucleus. That's where the DNA lives.
Okay.
Then they used CRISPR-Cas9. They designed guide RNAs to target the gray wolf versions of those 14 specific genes.
So the guide RNAs led Cas9 to those spots.
And Cas9 made the cuts, snipping out the gray wolf sequences at those 14 locations.
Okay, so you've got cuts in the gray wolf DNA. How do you paste in the dire wolf version?
Ah, that uses the cell's own repair kit. Cells naturally want to fix broken DNA.
Right.
So Colossal provided a template, pieces of DNA, containing the correct dire wolf sequences for those 14 genes.
And the cell uses that template to patch the breaks.
Exactly. The cell's repair machinery sees the break, sees the dire wolf template, and uses it as a guide to fix the gap, effectively writing the dire wolf genes into the gray wolf genome.
That is seriously clever, kind of hijacking the natural repair process.
Pretty much.
So now you have a gray wolf cell nucleus, but with those key dire wolf genes edited in. How do you get from that to a pup? Cloning, right?
Correct. That edited nucleus was then transferred into a gray wolf egg cell that had its own nucleus removed, and a nucleated egg.
Okay, put the edited DNA into an empty egg.
Yep. Then they stimulated that egg to start dividing, like a normal embryo. These embryos were then implanted into surrogate mothers.
Dogs, I read. Not wolves.
Yeah, surrogate dogs. 2 of them. And they gave birth to Romulus and Remus last October. Khaleesi came 4 months later from a 3rd surrogate.
Wow. And the pups nursed from the dogs initially?
Just briefly. Then they were bottle-fed by the care team.
And now they're living in this big sanctuary in Texas. What's that like for them?
It sounds pretty well set up. It's a huge space, 2,000 acres. High fences, of course, 3 meters.
Needs to be.
Definitely. They've got a vet clinic on site, shelters for bad weather, even natural-style dens built for them.
And lots of monitoring.
24/7 vet team watching them. They feed them whole chunks of raw meat.
To encourage natural behavior.
Yeah, tearing, that kind of thing. And behaviorally, it's interesting. They play together like puppies, chasing, nipping.
Normal pup stuff.
But towards humans, even their handlers, they're apparently quite aloof, wary. They back off if people get too close.
So not exactly tame.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And the plan is they'll live out their lives there, being studied, looking for any unexpected genetic changes or issues down the line.
It sounds like a responsible approach, given how new this all is. Okay, so dire wolves are one thing. But Colossal's next big target is, well, bigger, the woolly mammoth.
That's the really big one, yes. And they're making progress there, too. They recently announced they'd created woolly rhino cells using similar methods.
Woolly rhino. Okay, so they're building up the toolkit.
Seems like it.
Yep.
Demonstrates the tech works on other species, too.
And for mammoths, finding DNA must be easier than for dire wolves, right? Because of the permafrost.
Oh, much easier. Siberia's permafrost is like a giant deep freeze. It's preserved loads of mammoth remains, often with really good quality DNA. Way more material to work with.
Right. And the closest living relative is the Asian elephant.
Correct. And genetically, they're incredibly close, between 99.5% and 99.6% similar.
Closer than Asian and African elephants are to each other.
Even closer, yeah. So the Asian elephant is the starting point for the mammoth gene editing.
But it sounds like it's a much bigger job than the dire wolf was. More edits needed.
Significantly more complex. Initially, they were talking about maybe 65 gene edits for the mammoth.
Okay.
That number's now up to around 85.
85 genes compared to 14 for the dire wolf. What do those genes control?
All the classic mammoth traits.
Yeah.
The skull shape, that super shaggy fur, the big curved tusks, shorter tail, smaller ears for the cold, and that thick layer of fat.
Makes sense. But more edits means more chances for things to go wrong, I guess.
Absolutely. More complexity, higher risk of off-target edits or unforeseen interactions between the genes. Plus, there's another huge challenge.
What's that?
The gestation period. Asian elephants are pregnant for 22 months.
22 months. Compared to like 2 months for a wolf or dog.
Exactly. 2 months versus almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And Asian elephants are endangered. You can't just use hundreds of them as surrogates. It's a massive bottleneck, logistically and ethically.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. But Colossal's plan isn't just to make a mammoth, is it? They want to bring them back to the Arctic.
That's the mind-blowing part. The long-term goal is to breed them in large numbers and reintroduce them to places like the North Slope of Alaska, Siberia.
Why? What's the ecological reason for that?
It comes back to the permafrost, that frozen ground in the Arctic.
Right, you mentioned it holds a lot of carbon.
A truly staggering amount. It's hundreds of meters thick in places, packed with frozen plants, dead animals from thousands of years.
Okay.
If that thaws because the planet keeps warming up, all that organic stuff decomposes and releases carbon, CO2, methane.
How much carbon are we talking?
The estimate is around 1.5 trillion tons.
Trillion. That sounds bad.
It's terrifying. It's roughly double the carbon currently in the entire atmosphere,
Huh.
and about 15 times all human emissions since the Industrial Revolution started.
15 times. Wow, so it's like this massive potential carbon bomb sitting there.
Exactly. And the fuse is lit. Research shows parts of the Arctic are already starting to release more carbon than they store because of thawing and wildfires.
Okay, I see the problem. How do mammoths help stop this?
Colossal sees them as, and this is their term, an ultimate ecological tool.
How? What would they do?
Think back to the Ice Age, the Pleistocene. The Arctic wasn't tundra like today. It was mostly this vast grassland called the Mammoth steppe.
Right. Supported huge herds of animals.
Exactly. Much more productive than today's moss and shrubs. Mammoths, as giant grazers, could help shift it back.
By eating the shrubs and stuff.
Eating shrubs, trampling down mosses, that lets grasses take over again.
Okay.
Grasslands store more carbon long term.
Okay. What else?
The trampling is key in winter, too. They'd pack down the snow.
How does that help?
Packed snow doesn't insulate the ground as well as fluffy snow, so the cold winter air penetrates deeper, freezing the soil more effectively, keeping the permafrost frozen.
Has anyone tested that?
Yeah, studies with bison show their trampling can lower soil temperatures by 4 to 6 degrees Celsius.
Wow. And mammoths are way bigger than bison.
Exactly. The effect could be much stronger. So, restore the mammoth steppe, support more biodiversity, and crucially help keep that 1.5 trillion tons of carbon locked safely in the freezer.
Using mammoths to fight climate change. It's an incredible idea.
Yeah.
But that bottleneck, the 22-month pregnancy, endangered elephants, how do they get around that for large-scale reintroduction?
Well, this is maybe the most sci-fi part of it all. Colossal is actively working on developing artificial elephant wombs.
Artificial wombs
Ugh.
for elephant.
Yeah, ectogenesis. Growing the embryos outside a living surrogate, it's hugely ambitious, technologically very challenging.
Understatement.
But if they could pull it off, it solves the surrogate problem. It would allow them to scale up mammoth production without relying on living elephants.
That is mind-bending stuff. Really pushes the boundaries.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to the definition problem, doesn't it? Time magazine had a cover on this.
Yep, the de-extinction issue.
Colossal must know this is a huge part of the conversation. What are these animals?
Oh, they definitely anticipate the debate. Their chief science advisor, Beth Shapiro, she's a big name in ancient DNA.
Right.
She's been quite upfront. She says, look, genetically, the mammoths they create will still be an Asian elephant, just with some added mammoth genes.
So scientifically, it's modified elephant DNA.
Correct. But then she adds the crucial however.
Which is?
If it looks like a mammoth, acts like a mammoth, fits the ecological role of a mammoth, and importantly, if it can breed with others like it and produce mammoth offspring.
Then maybe the purely genetic label doesn't matter as much in practice.
That's the argument. If it walks like a mammoth and quacks like a mammoth, well, maybe it is a mammoth, functionally speaking. By that standard, she argues, their dire wolves are dire wolves, and their mammoths will be mammoths, because they'll have the key defining traits.
It really forces you to think about what defines a species, doesn't it?
Right.
Genetics, appearance, behavior, ability to reproduce.
Exactly. There's no single easy answer, especially when technology allows us to blur these lines in ways we never could before.
It's a profound question. Well, this has been absolutely packed with information, a real journey through the science, the ambition, the challenges.
It's a field moving incredibly fast.
For sure. We've covered the dire wolf revival with CRISPR, the tech itself, Colossal's huge mission, the Mammoth Project, the potential climate benefits, the ethical hurdles. It's a lot.
And, like you said, lots of different viewpoints to consider.
Definitely. So maybe the thought to leave everyone with is this. Thinking about everything we've talked about, the genetics, the appearance, the behavior, the potential ecological roles, what really makes a species is 99.5% similarity plus the key functional traits enough to call something revived. Where do we draw the line? And zooming out, what are the deeper implications, good and bad, of bringing creatures back from extinction, even with potentially noble goals like fighting climate change?
Big questions, no easy answers.
Definitely something to mull over. Lots to think about there.